Good morning, everybody, and welcome to InsureTalk 22. My name is Nontutugo Mkhungu, and I'll be your host for this session. Well, we have a fantastic lineup in store for you, as always, with today's theme being the new normal. What does the data say? This is what you can look forward to in the session. All right, let me take this opportunity now to thank all of our sponsors, without whom the session would not be possible. A huge thank you to Discovery, coming in as our headline sponsor today, as well as our event partners, the IISA, who have assisted with the accreditation of today's content for 2.5 CPD hours, and of course not forgetting Cover magazine coming in as our media partner. All right, without any further ado, then let's get right into our first speaker. Tamara Parker is the CEO at Mercer South Africa. She's going to be talking to us today around change management and insights. Over to you, Tamara.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. For those of you that are not familiar with Mercer, Mercer is a global specialist HR consulting firm, and we are part of the Marsh McLennan family of businesses. So we're a business of Marsh McLennan. I hope I've got some colleagues on the call with me today to give me some support. I'm going to be talking to you. Maybe you're wondering why an HR specialist is speaking at an insurance conference. So the purpose of our talk today is to talk about what does this new normal look like? What does it mean when we return to work? But broader than that, for those of you that are on the call today that are business leaders or managers, or even if you are employees and wondering what the people agenda might be in the coming few years, I hope that this will be interesting to you. I'm going to be speaking to a report that Mercer runs globally every year, which is called Global Talent Trends. And it starts to identify some of those trends for the future and able to help you to think about what some of those trends could be. I want to just talk about two very important things. We talk about ESG and sustainability, and from a people point of view, that means something very specific for us. Not only for yourselves as businesses in the insurance landscape, but also for your investors. People are more and more concerned about the sustainability of your talent. Are you able to attract, retain, motivate, and develop the right talent in your organizations to really be successful in the market? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that all of us know that in the insurance world, at the beginning of COVID, there was a little bit of uptick. Insurance companies were able to bring new products and services on board to deal with the pandemic. But as the pandemic and the lockdowns kind of dragged out, what we saw globally was a drop in performance of insurance agencies, largely because a lot of revenue is dependent on employment. So in other words, the more people that are employed in organizations, the bigger the pots in terms of whether it's pensions or medical aids or any of those kind of things. And I think the second thing is that many people found themselves financially challenged. And so people's, their insurance kind of dropped off, or they got rid of assets and therefore didn't need the kind of insurance. So on the one hand, there's an importance in the insurance agency and all of us in South Africa to make sure we're kick-starting our economy all over again so that we can all be successful as part of that sustainability agenda. And therefore, what does it mean for people? Are you able to motivate and to acquire the right talent for your business? So that's largely what I'm going to be talking about today. I think this requires a focus on talent from everybody, not just as managers or business leaders, but also from yourselves. What kind of skills are you thinking about? How are you looking at the future? What is concerning you about the way in which the world is moving? And what can you do for yourself to be able to manage some of that anxiety or uncertainty about the way in which the future looks? So I'm going to share my screen. I'm a little bit tech challenged, so please bear with me while I do that. Okay, I hope that you can all see my screen. And as I said, I'm speaking to a report that Mercer publishes every year called Global Talent Trends. I'll have a link at the end. If anyone is interested, you'll be able to download that report for yourself. Or if you'd like, you can email me and I'll send you a copy. So what we found in this year's report is that these are the 5 areas that people are focusing on in terms of the people agenda. Our reports, in terms of the survey that we do, we survey executives, C-suite, we survey HR executives, but we also survey employees to understand what their concerns are going forward. And these were the 5 trends that came out of our report for 2022. I'm going to go over each one a little bit briefly, just to give you a taste of what that's about, so you can start thinking about your businesses or yourselves. So the 5 trends are: 1, resetting for relevance. So we're going back into a new way of work. How are we building resilience, and how are we ourselves making sure that we are resetting ourselves to be relevant in the workplace? The second thing is working in partnerships, not just about your partnerships in the market, whether you're with your brokers or advisors or those things, but internally, how are you working in partnership within your organization? Are we delivering on total well-being? This became a huge trend, as we know, during COVID. I'm going to show you some interesting stats in terms of how employees are feeling about how companies are looking after the well-being, total well-being. Building for employability, not just for your organization in terms of making sure you have the future skills, but also for yourself in terms of what are you doing to ensure that you have the skills for the future. And then the last thing is harnessing collective energy, really important in our new work environments, being agile, being able to deal with hybrid work environments, and how do we create energy within those environments, which are not necessarily in person all of the time. So those are the 5 trends. Please, any questions, if you pop them in the Q&A, I can't promise, but I'll spend a few minutes after this if there are any questions that you'd like to ask. So resetting for relevance, what does that mean? It's about your reputation. Are you relevant in the market? Are you able to attract the right kind of people into your organization? The biggest reason that employees join a company after job security is your brand or reputation. So it's really important that you're putting out into the market what you're doing around ESG, that you're ensuring that you have a diverse workforce so that you can manage your reputation. We all know in South Africa, we've had examples of organizations putting out advertising or something which really upsets people, and that's a brand issue. And then the last thing is that executives are very alert to the challenges. We know at the moment that the World Economic Forum is meeting in Davos, and sustainability and ESG are top of their agenda. So it's important that we too, not just for ourselves, but for our investors, are thinking about these things. So what should you be doing about that? So the first thing is you should make your values visible and build a culture of ESG and sustainability. If you want to attract the right talent, make sure that you as a brand are communicating your values to the market, to the talent market, as well as to your investor market, as well as to your customer base. You need to build sufficient adaptive capacity, all right? So in other words, back in the old days, we had a job, it was in a little box, and we always knew what we were doing, and we had some kind of career path, and we stayed in that track. And when things happened in the business, we weren't really aware of it, right? Now we're talking about, can we swarm together a group of people to tackle a specific problem, which we tackle as a project. And once that project is done, we move on to other areas of the business. In other words, how can we, one, make our own organizations adaptive, but how can we as individuals make sure that we have the skills that are able to move around an organization? And then last thing, as I said, make sure you're advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just about ticking boxes on a BBBE scorecard, right? It's about saying the more different points of view I have in an organization, the more innovative I'm going to be able to be, and the easier I am going to be to solve problems. And this is not just about a race or a gender diversity. It's about, if you only have financial people in your financial services organization, they might not see some of the broader issues. So it's about having musicians, for example, or other kinds of skills and people who think differently from yourself. So that's the first trend. The second trend is about working in partnership. And what this means is it's about partnering with your employees. What we're hearing more and more from employees is that they don't want to work for you anymore. They want you to work with them to, one, ensure that their careers are growing, to meet the demands that they might have in terms of their entire lives, not just their work life, to come to the party around hybrid work. So 47% of employees are saying they'll only stay or join a company if they're able to work remotely or hybrid. It doesn't mean they want to be home all the time, but at least they must be able to have some days where they can do things that are of personal importance to them and maybe make up the work at night, or be able to drop and pick up kids from school, etc., whatever those requirements are. And executives are recognizing that there's strengths in numbers, and so they want to be able to build that resilience partnership. So that's something you should be thinking about. We also, when we did our survey and addressed these issues, it's about career equity and digital exhaustion. I'm sure all of you that worked from home in the past couple of years understood that it was very difficult to switch off at the end of the day. Wherever your laptop was or your computer was set up, you probably walked past it a million times in the evening and thought about, oh, let me just check if I've got any new email, or there's something I need to do, or the bookends of your day. The traveling to work in the morning, which is a kind of way to get your head into thinking about the day, and the traveling home in the afternoon, which is where you kind of switch off and get ready to be back at home. We lost those bookends during COVID when we were working from home, and it led to a lot of exhaustion. So employees in the future are expecting a hybrid or remote working environment. 48% of people are saying that. 84% of people are saying we expect the same wage if we're doing the same job, regardless of whether we're remote or on location. So in other words, how are we going to manage those things? And 66% of workers said that or employees said that they had problem disconnecting from work when they were remote. The C-suite is concerned that 72% that employees now see remote working or hybrid working as a deal breaker, right? It's a little bit around trust. It's a little bit about culture. It's a little bit around, what we can do together and what we need to do alone, that they're concerned that they're not going to get the right employees in. There's 72% are concerned that remote workers will have a more difficult time getting promoted. This was a big concern even at the beginning of the pandemic, and even for organizations that prior to the pandemic were doing a lot of remote work. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. How am I going to get promoted, or how am I going to promote people when I don't see them every day? I think we're all a little bit concerned about that. And 39% are confident that they can create a climate of trust to enable flex or remote working. That's a very low percentage. We need to be able to get our leadership into a position where they're confident, where they trust that people working remotely are working towards objectives, and those objectives build a better business. So what should you be doing about it? You can reimagine new work contracts in terms of the way we work. At Mercer, for example, we have now got 2 types of contracts. We have an expectation that people will be in the office 2 or 3 times a week, which of course is flexible. It could be that you're there for 1 hour today and 4 hours tomorrow. We recognize that there are some things that need to be done in person, and there are some things that can be done remotely, and we're very clear around what those things are. And we have new contracts for people that work from home, just to ensure that we are managing check requirements, health and safety, and that we are working differently in terms of the way objectives are met. And then you want to maintain equitable partnerships. I'm not going to read it through. I'm sure you can see what it says. I think the most important one at the bottom is to equip your managers and your employees to ensure that there's no bias in pay and promotion in terms of where you work from, but rather to manage by objectives and outcomes. All right, this is super important. I think this came up in almost every survey, in every spot poll we did during the past 2 years, was a concern over well-being, right? We know that some people were home with very difficult circumstances, children, small spaces, not being able to find a space to be quiet and alone, which led to stress. And on the other hand, we had people that were alone and feeling isolated, which led to feelings of not feeling well. I think the last thing, and super important to understand, I spoke right at the beginning about ensuring that you have a purpose and being able to brand that purpose. We know about the Great Resignation, largely in Europe and the US. Most of the people that were leaving their jobs were talking about not feeling a sense of purpose or not having a meaning. All right, so those are also important things to think about. What we found was that total employee well-being is the number 2 initiative that executives said they're going to focus on in the next 2 years. But unfortunately, our HR leaders think it's only number 17. So it's really important that we start to get an alignment between what executives are feeling is important and what our HR leaders are doing in terms of ensuring that wellness, total wellness, is brought into the way that we work. 1 in 3 employees would forego a pay rise if there were additional benefits for themselves and their families. So not only is that an important issue within your own organizations, but even in terms of your products and services, it's important to think about how you be looking at benefits and well-being benefits. And then lastly, high growth companies are 1.5 times more likely to say that they have seen a measurable return on their well-being spend. So now's the time to re-engage our executives and invest. Right, very important if you want to be able to attract and retain talent, but very much if you want to motivate and engage your talent to be the best that they can be. So what you should be doing is focusing on healthy outcomes, using data to do that. We all know if you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that in terms of gender differences, very few organizations are looking at specific healthcare needs of women and specific healthcare needs of men, which could be different from an overall healthcare solution. And then just making sure that they're having healthy habits about culture, communications, nudging people. In other words, nudging people to have a Zoom-free day, nudging people to have an email-free afternoon, nudging people to have a bookend at the end of every day where they formally shut down in their minds, even though they're at home. And then building for employability, very important, not just for your business, but also for yourselves. Building skills is super important for the way in which we go forward. I spoke about the way in which agile organizations are going to be changing, so that skills are going to move around your organization rather than jobs, right? So the notion of a job, which is in a box that has its parameters, is beginning to decrease. And the thing about paying for skills or having the skills required for the future, and those skills are more generalist and can move to which parts of the business they need, is becoming very important. So I hope that all of you are part of the 93% of employees. While you're on this call today, I hope all of you are part of those 93% of employees that tried to learn a skill recently. And I hope that you continue to do that. And of course, all HR executives said that their companies have significant skill gaps. So I think the most important thing is for not just yourselves, but for your organizations to understand what those skills of the future are, and that you bridge that gap through focused skill development, right? If you guys want to stay in the insurance industry, for example, you might desperately want to be a guitar player, and learning how to play the guitar is certainly a skill that you can learn, but is it going to be part of your career path? Is it going to help you to become more employable or to become more valuable within your own organization? And within your organization, are you ensuring that you are creating and building the right skills? Sorry, my PowerPoint's just gone on the blink. So what you should be doing is, first of all, securing this future with the skills that you need for the future, and then building pathways so that everyone can be prosperous, right? Not leaving anybody behind. I think one of the things, and I'll talk about it in the next section, is that people are terrified of AI and automation and concerned about what that means for their jobs, right? And it's up to us as leaders, and it's up to us as an industry to ensure, one, that you are getting your employees ready for the next step, but also being very clear around what those pathways are so that people are feeling secure. And the last one is, and for me, the most important, this is what I love to do. It's about harnessing collective energy. It's about keeping people engaged and motivated. I know that it might not seem very important, but it is the #1 consideration for successful organizations. Successful organizations have engaged and motivated employees that will move around, around the business and not feel worried about it. So it's about human-centric leadership, right? We need to deliver on a collective vision of what this future looks like. So we can't have a group of people forging ahead and leaving a whole set of employees behind. So the first thing is that people are saying, I expect AI or automation to significantly change the way my job is done. And that is up from 2020 by 44%. So I think more and more of us are becoming aware of digitalization, AI, and automation. And 70% of employees said, when I consider the future of work, I believe it will be balanced, that work will be redesigned to allow time for family, hobbies, etc. And I think when I talk to my team about AI and automation, what I always say to them is, there are some tasks that none of us want to do. Wouldn't it be great if those things were taken over through automation or AI, so that we were left with things that really, make us happy, make us think, make us engaged, etc., and leave us time to be complete people, all right, with a life outside of work. And so the work experience sits between what employees expect and what the event and the environment kind of does to shape that environment. And then I think this for me is about this work-life integration. I think while there were many things during lockdown and working from home that some of us might have struggled with, like not being able to turn off, like having kids running under our desks, or like being alone, at the same time, we learned new ways of really enjoying our lives, right? Of having an integration of work and life. And so some people complained that their work-life balance went down, but a lot of people found ways to improve their work-life balance, and they want to see that going forward. So we've started to talk, that we have employee experience, we measure for it, we have engagement surveys every year. We understand that there's consumer experience or customer experience, and we work out journeys to understand how our customers experience us. But now we're starting to see this thing about life experience, right? Energizing employees will thrive in your organization and will stay. What does that mean? A little bit more detail. So it's about things that amplify our energy, that make us more energetic, therefore more motivated, therefore better employees, and help the whole organization to perform. And then there's things that really drag our energy down and make us either leave an organization or not give 100% or not give our best. Right? I'm not going to read them through, but I'll just give you a minute just to have a look at what that is. And so what you should be doing is designing human-centric work experiences, right? In other words, putting people at the center and understanding how you're going to motivate them and engage them and energize them. So remembering what those things are that energize us, and remembering what those things are that drag away from our energy. And build a relatable people function. So for those of you that do work with your HR business partners or your HR executives very closely, it's about having that conversation about what your employees require, what your employees are saying, what you can see motivates and demotivates them, and ensuring that you're working with your people functions to build the kind of environments that will optimize that. And then, using target interaction models to redesign your HR function. In other words, that your HR function is not simply just a set of processes or things that have to get done, but rather it's how your people function interfaces and interacts with the rest of the people in the organization to ensure that you together are working towards a purpose and working towards the success of your organization. So that's them. Those are the 5. I hope those are interesting to you. I hope that you will think about those either as business leaders or as employees and understand what you need to do for your own future. I hope that you will embrace the change, which can be seen as very exciting. And I hope if you want to do anything else, there's the link at the bottom. Or you can go onto our Mercer website. You'll see the link for the Global Talent Trends. If you're interested, please download it. Otherwise, as I said, please reach out to me and I will happily send that to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for that very insightful talk. I loved what you shared at the beginning, that it's not enough to just attract the right talent, but that retention is just as important. So thank you so much for that. All right, our next speaker now is Precious Nduli. Precious is the head of technical marketing at Discovery Insure. Precious is going to be chatting to us today around insurance trends. Over to you, Precious.
Thanks so much, Noni, for that introduction. Apologies, I was on mute still. Thank you so much, Noni, for that introduction. A very good morning to everyone today. I hope you're all keeping well in this period and keeping warm as it's starting to get a bit chilly. Just on behalf of Discovery Insure, we're really privileged to be able to partner with the InsureTalk platform today. We also just want to congratulate the platform for the growth experienced in this period. Huge numbers that it attracts. Obviously, we believe in anything that encourages knowledge sharing in the industry. So we're really proud to be a part of the InsureTalk. I also just on behalf of Discovery want to thank Tamara Parker from Mercer for agreeing to be one of our speakers. It was a fascinating talk. And really just speaks to the idea of this new normal and what does the data say from an HR perspective, or at least kind of employee trends perspective. So really thank you for agreeing to be one of our speakers, and we hope that you guys will enjoy also our next speaker, Ron. But the purpose of my talk is really to, I guess, take us back to insurance. In terms of what we're seeing from a pure insurance perspective. So I'm just going to share my screen. You can see that? I'm assuming you can see that. So basically we've had an interesting period, obviously, from an insurance perspective. It's part of the global pandemic, and the different insurance events that have happened that have shaped the insurance industry. Obviously the most recent being KZN, and just how that impacts our view of insurance and our view of risk going forward. So if we, just to kick off, what is the current landscape of insurance currently? So, the first thing to say is that actually insurance is quite resilient as an industry, and most of us know this. What we see is that the short-term insurance continues to grow. There's been a 7.6% average growth rate in the last period. But it goes without saying that consumers are definitely under pressure from various aspects. One of the biggest ones we've seen is that there's been a 26% increase in fuel, in the price of fuel. And obviously that has, knock-on effects in terms of general costs from a transportation perspective, from a food perspective. So basically, there's a pressure on disposable income from a consumer perspective. We see there's a 5.9% general inflation rate. Salaries may not be growing at the same rate. So in real terms, people actually have less money in their pockets. And obviously, the pandemic and its impact continues to play out in terms of income as well, with 55% of consumers saying household income has been negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of just the general environment, we've seen that there's also been unpredictable economic growth. And obviously in a period of volatile economic growth, i.e., periods of growth and periods of reduction in GDP, what we see is that obviously employment is also under pressure. And we know South Africa has one of the worst employment rates in the world. So just in general, the pool of insurance customers is under pressure. And that's important from an insurance perspective, because we need to think about how do we manage and cushion that blow for consumers as well. This is coupled with the fact that, we actually are starting to return to normal. So people are trying to get back. As noted, in the slide, but also in the presentation that has gone, is that most people will be in this hybrid model, which means people will return to driving, which means obviously motor risk kind of comebacks and increase. And we've seen that in our own data as well, that there's already been a 9% increase in mileage driven from just the 2021 figures. So again, people are driving, people are being exposed to motor risk, and obviously transport costs are increasing as well as just general costs for consumers, which obviously means people are thinking about how to actually, thinking about their insurance and how to be covered. What is gratifying to see, though, is that if you look at the study from the Mission Fund, so this is a study that was done, it shows that people actually still value insurance a lot. That's because insurance gives security in the face of uncertainty. So if you look at the pyramid, it shows that insurance is the second most valuable financial need after income, obviously. So people still value the insurance and they see the value of insurance. And that's just because, as we know, most people cannot sustain the costs or withstand the costs. For example, as quoted here, fewer than 40% of people can withstand the cost of an emergency car repair without taking a loan. So insurance cushions individuals, but obviously businesses as well. So insurance actually forms a social protection mechanism. And I think that's important for us in the industry to really say that we play a very important role. And this has been evident in the most recent catastrophes that we've experienced. The first one being the riots in KZN, largely in KZN and a bit in Gauteng in 2021. As you know, obviously, we're still reeling from that loss. It's an estimated 50 billion loss to the national economy, with over 200 shopping centers impacted, over 100 malls targeted. SASRIA, obviously, who covers riots, has received claims in excess of 32 billion. So it's a significant impact to the industry and just showcases the role of insurance. And then the most recent floods in KZN, which, as you know, happened a few weeks ago, but also have resurged, unfortunately, in the last weekend as well. Just with the first event or the first wave of that, costs were estimated at over 10 billion, or the impact of it, with over 13,500 homes destroyed and unfortunately lost lives. On our own book alone, we're sitting in over 80 million rand in claims from just a personal insurance side, excluding commercial. So really a significant impact, and just underscores that the value of insurance has never been more important than it is right now. In terms of what I want to focus on is, so what should insurance companies be thinking about, or what are they thinking about in this current time? So firstly is, as I've laid out in the context, consumers are under pressure. We think insurers need to play an important role, or do play an important role, in coming up with innovative ways to help clients to save. Secondly, the risks that clients are exposed to are changing dramatically at a dramatic pace. So it's important that insurers understand that risk, one, so that we are able to price for it and offer the best solution, but also that we are able to protect our customers as well. Thirdly, which is not a new trend, but obviously continues to be relevant to the industry, is that insurers are going digital to allow them to better understand clients, as well as create efficiencies in the process. So from a product design perspective, how can insurers help to save? So there are many ways, but we're going to use an example from our case. As you know, Discovery Insure has a program called Vitality Drive, where we encourage our customers to actually improve their driving behavior. When they do so, it creates savings that can be shared back to them in terms of rewards. So what we're saying here, the first idea is that insurers are actually in a great position to not only manage insurance costs for customers, but also broader non-insurance costs, i.e., can we find an innovative ways to actually help consumers make the total cost of vehicle ownership much lower? We do that through negotiating discounts for our clients and passing them that back to them through good driving behavior. So one of the ways, or at least 3 examples that are on the screen in terms of how we do that. So we offer our clients up to 50% off in terms of car seats discount, an average discount of 1,800. Clients can save up to 20% on their tire purchases at Tiger Wheel and Tire, and this can be funded 100% with the remaining balance in what we call the Insure Fund account. So Insure Fund account is also actually contributed to by your good driving behavior, and you can use that fund to not only pay for excesses, but also for your tires as well. In addition, we also have, for clients who have our warranty benefit, they can get up to 100% car servicing and maintenance costs, again, based on driving behavior. This is an average saving of $3,150 per year. So innovative ways that help clients to save, making the total cost of vehicle ownership much lower. In addition, the actual insurance premium can also be controlled by how you drive. So the better you drive, so the graph here shows that people who actually drive well have a 50% lower loss ratio than people who drive badly. So those are blue client or blue status drivers versus diamond or gold drivers. And with that saving, we can actually pass it back in terms of lower premiums for clients, but also discounts on various programs. For example, our headline benefit is up to 50% back on fuel spend. So again, making the cost of ownership lower for customers. And it's our challenge to the industry to come up with more innovative ways to create value for our customers as well. The second idea is around risks and how risks are actually changing. So we've seen, and really influenced by the COVID pandemic as well, lasting impacts and really unprecedented changes in risk that we're currently seeing. So the first thing is that obviously traditional risks will remain and continue to be relevant, but we want to say that risks are evolving and are saying these are the risks that should also be on our radar. So as I said, traditional risk will always, be relevant. As we've seen, the first example, whether it's the risk of riots, in fact, we used to think that was a negligible risk, certainly when, but we've seen over time, particularly with social unrest, that this is a real risk. Obviously vehicle protection, and accident risk. South Africa is one of the highest accident rates in the world. So, the need to protect your asset as your car as an asset, as well as your home, will always be relevant. And from traditional risks, things like fires, accidents, etc. And then obviously, as a third thing, only a third of adults actually understand basic financial concepts. So it's financial advisors will continue to play an important role in terms of addressing client needs. But what we want to say today that the world is changing at an exponential rate. And with it, there's an incredible change in risks. And we want to highlight really three things and what we're seeing in our data as a big focus and will have kind of lasting impacts on the industry as well. So the three things are really inflation, particularly, vehicle claims inflation. The second is weather patterns. And the third is load shedding. So from an inflation perspective, as I said, COVID-19, and as I said, Ron will kind of look at the clinical view of COVID-19 and what we're seeing from a health perspective, but actually kind of in a very unexpected, certainly it wasn't, intuitive, as much as COVID changed people's lives, certainly people's health, we didn't think it was going to have such a direct impact on vehicle insurance, but it has had lasting impacts on vehicle insurance. The first phenomena that we saw is that during the lockdown, lockdowns prevented shipping containers from being picked up after delivery. So in some ports in 2021, there were more than 350,000 idle containers. In addition, as we know, there was an increase from work from home, so which increased the demand for computers. And obviously there are other uses for computers, in the world as well. For example, the increase in Bitcoin mining. So all of this demand has a knock-on effect. The first effect is that just shipping prices, and we know obviously that has a direct impact on vehicles because most of the vehicles that come into South Africa are imported. There's been a significant cost in shipping prices, as you can see, denoted by that graph, almost a five-fold increase in shipping costs. And that obviously will be passed on in terms of the cost of vehicles. In addition, what we see is that there's a global microchip and obviously then a vehicle shortage. So vehicles actually account for 15% of microchip demand. The knock-on effect of that is that we've seen just with two manufacturers and others to follow. So Toyota has decreased vehicle production by 20% in April. Ford is also expected to produce 1 million fewer cars due to this shortage. This comes at a time when actually the demand for vehicles is increasing, because as we can see with our mileage, is that people are driving more, or at least mileage is returning to kind of the pre-COVID levels. So this combination of reduced supply as well as increased demand, as you know, in economics, that leads to higher price. So that's the phenomena. And again, it just means, what it means from an insurance perspective is we've seen it already in the data. So just unprecedented levels of inflation that we've never seen before. This is being sort of impacting repairs as well as replacements. So if you look at just the first graph, shows increase per part across various different parts. So with most parts, kind of the most used parts rising above 10%. What we've shown in the second graph is also by car brand, and we've compared 2020 to 2021, being the gray and the blue lines. And what you see is that, and obviously we've hidden brands because we can't show specific brands, but you see that every manufacturer is passing on really high increases. What we see on an average basis is that in 2020, the average car parts inflation was 3.2%. This has gone up 4 times to 13.2% in 2021. So significant increases. In addition, we're seeing a phenomena that we have not seen. Typically people expect that secondhand vehicles will go down in price, as obviously the vehicle gets older. But as you see in the third graph, through data, through TransUnion, we see that there's actually been an increase in vehicle inflation. And again, that, as I said, the most direct impact is just increasing claims cost. And what that means from an industry perspective is that we're going to see an increase in rates. The actual premium will have to go up because, as you know, premiums are basically a function of how likely are you to claim times severity, or like your expected cost of the claim. So in quite simple terms, you'll see increases in the market. And we've started to see that across the industry as well. And this is not just a local phenomena, it's actually a global phenomena as well, with many insurance companies across the, if not all reporting worsening loss ratios. And what we think is, so as we said, the direct impact is premium, but we also think that it's an important time now for insurers to actually play a role in trying to cushion those costs, or cushion the impact for clients as well, as much as is possible through product design or other solutions. So the first impact that we've seen is that there's been incredible repair delays impacting clients. So for example, car hire, which is typically 30 days in the industry, is not sufficient. One way is we countering that is to offer clients extended car hire, 60-day car hire through a small premium. They can actually have extended car hire in the event of a claim. The second phenomenon that we're seeing is that in times of high inflation, the retail value of the car may not be enough to match the cost of replacing the vehicle. So an example, it's a real example from a real client, is, a client had a total loss event. So the cost to repair or replace the vehicle is nearly 700,000, 69995. But the actual sum insured is 652. So there's a shortfall of 47,000. Is there a way that you can create, again, through innovative product design? We have something that we call the retail value booster up front. Clients can choose to have their sum insured plus 15% in the event of a claim. In fact, we're reviewing that to give even more options now. But this is another way where insurers can actually find innovative ways to actually cushion the blow. Because as we said, even though there's economic pressure and that some clients can be tempted to cut insurance cover, however, right now is exactly where clients need the most reliable and widest cover the most. So that's the first big trend from a risk perspective. The second is around weather. As we know, there's a general consensus in the market that loss ratios have worsened due to the weather. And there's some quotes from competitors just in terms of that consensus, and I'm not going to read it, but some similar sentiments from Santam Outsurance and Old Mutual around weather, a bigger focus on weather, on tracking weather events, but also that it has had a direct impact on results in the last period. In addition, what we've seen is that in 2020, there's already been 84 severe weather events, just globally, with obviously in South Africa, the most recent and devastating being the KZN floods, as I've already noted. This is compared to 112 severe events in 2021, which just shows how volatile weather can be. So it's important from an insurance perspective to start understanding weather patterns and understanding how they can actually impact your business, your pricing, and really trying to get on top of that. And what we've seen is that actually, whilst weather seems unpredictable, it actually does follow some kind of a cycle, and the impact can actually be predicted. And that's what we're showing on this slide. The first, as you know, the phenomena of La Nina and El Nino. So ENSO refers to the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So that is just the fact that every few years, there's a change in weather patterns from warm to cool weather. And the impact of that is that, wetter weather, we have periods of wetter weather, which obviously results in more claims from an insurance perspective, and then almost drier weather as well. What we've seen when you look at the graph is that this can actually be mapped. So in periods of La Nina, where it's wetter weather, you can actually see an increase in loss ratio, and then a decrease in periods of, when that reduces. And what we see in our data is that there's an impact of between 1.3 and 6.1% change in loss ratio or worsening loss ratio. And this is with a 90% confidence. And so it means that we actually, even though weather seems unpredictable, is that actually you can plan for it as an insurance company much more accurately, because the impact can actually be measured. And using historical data, you can actually be in a better position for future and in terms of how you price going forward as well. So it's going to be incredibly important for insurers to understand weather. I mean, the last impact from a weather perspective, obviously, is climate change. And again, global warming is measurable. We have seen and can measure the temperature rise over time. And what this leads to, from the second graph perspective, is that climate change has impacted a number of natural disasters over time, and kind of has led to an increase in natural disasters, as we know, over time across several types, whether it's wildfires, extreme weather, floods, etc. There's been an increase. And the final point is to say in South Africa, climate change is expected to decrease the days of rainfall, but increase rainfall intensity. And I think we're seeing that already. And, it's how do we plan for it so that, we are in a position, obviously we're pricing correctly so that the business is sustainable, but also that we are able to protect our clients, and this means there's going to be an even bigger need for insurers or demand on insurers from a societal response perspective, not only to just provide insurance, but how can you, like social protection, closing the insurance gap, and all of those things. So it's going to be more critical in the industry. The last risk that is critical in South Africa, as we know, is the idea around load shedding. And again, load shedding has become more intense in the last while. What we want to say here, you can see what we've mapped is in periods of severe load shedding, loss ratio goes up, particularly power surge claims, which then obviously are devastating on an individual level in terms of clients, but obviously to the book as well. So with increases in load shedding, it's important for us to understand it so that we price properly, but also that we have the best solutions for clients out there as well. Finally, I want to touch about, again, a topic that's been spoken about, but obviously critical to say, insurers are going to go more digital, firstly, to better serve their customers, but also to manage costs. Again, because with increasing loss ratios, it's important to get operational efficiencies to actually manage costs. It's more important to price correctly, to have the right data, to ultimately manage costs so that you can cushion the blow for your customers, but also to run a sustainable business. So obviously, all of us know the gains, or at least the benefit of digitization. And we've tried to look at it across the spheres that are important: clients, insurers, as well as society. So firstly, from a client perspective, obviously digital leads to speedy services. And you can get tailored services anywhere. What we've seen with the pandemic is that more than 70% of South Africans are now shopping online at least once a month. Again, so how do we access customers? It's probably going to be in the online environment. From an insurer perspective, as alluded to, with the digital interactions, it leads to more data and therefore better pricing capabilities. And in this environment of heightened risk, better pricing capabilities is more important than ever, because that can lead to lower costs and better premium offering. A study by Deloitte expects that insurers who undertake digital investments will grow rapidly in 2022. And then society gains. One, because people are protected, as we said up front, insurance plays a societal role, the role of societal protection, ensuring protection and continuity. So if we are better able to insure people and businesses, we can actually protect society. In addition, data allows us to detect fraud through advanced analytics and AI. This is because over 29 billion is lost each year due to car insurance fraud, as estimated by Risk. And of course, if we don't stop that tap of fraud, it means prices go up for consumers. And as we already said, at this current moment, consumers are under pressure, businesses are under pressure because of loss ratio, insurance companies are under pressure. So it's important to manage costs right now. What Deloitte says in their study finally is that they see that the highest investment costs in insurance, marketing, sales, and distribution will be in data and analytics, meaning that the benefits of these three spheres are driven by insurance intermediaries as well. Just lastly, to touch on, obviously, data, as we said, we're living in a data-rich society, with new ways of collecting data every day. So for example, we use there, drones are being used to underwrite agricultural insurance. We've introduced a new device for our heavy commercial vehicle product, where actually you can measure driving behavior, but also it actually is a camera in the vehicle, which will get more relevant as well. So all these different ways of sourcing data. So it is going to be more important of how do you actually collect that data, how do you store it. In our example, we have over 15.2 billion kilometers of driving data, and that grows every single day. But there's obviously heightened risk. So where is that data stored? Heightened risk from a cyber security perspective as well. And then, there's various every single day new ways of processing that data. Just as an example, over 100 machine learning papers are published every single day, meaning that claims, reserving and pricing techniques are constantly being improved. And that's where we're going to continue to go. As we said, with better data, you will have better insights in terms of risks. Just some examples from our data as well. Typically, everybody understands that females are on average better than males from a driving behavior, but it's not just a blanket statement. With data, you can actually come to it's a granular understanding. Females are actually better, from a speeding perspective by 19%, from acceleration, they accelerate much smoother by 29%, they corner smoothly by 26%, whereas actually on average, males are better in braking as well as not using their cell phone while driving by 24%. So it's not a blanket statement, it's actually an accurate understanding of risk, which is a much fairer way to price consumers as well. The last insight is that even with younger drivers, again, younger drivers are typically on average regarded as worse than older drivers because they're less experienced, but actually you can have good younger drivers, who are better than the average poor older driver. And if we understand that, we can price them better. One example here is that drivers aged 20 to 30 actually drive 20% less than those aged 30 to 40. So from that perspective, they actually could be a lower risk because they're actually not on the road as much. And if we understand that, we know how to price them better, as I've already said. So just in summary then, one, I think what I've said today is that insurance plays, and insurers, all of us, play an incredibly important role in terms of being social protection. We can actually help consumers through innovative product design to actually manage not just insurance costs, but broader non-insurance costs and make the total sort of vehicle ownership much lower. Risks are changing dramatically. One, inflation, more need than ever to protect clients. Weather patterns are changing drastically and it will affect pricing, and it's important for us to understand it. Load shedding, again, causing increases in loss ratio. Important that clients are adequately covered for power surge and that we can price it correctly. And finally, digital will continue to impact us, leading to more data. Data can only help in insurance because it helps with better understanding of clients, but also better pricing. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if there are questions. I don't think we're taking questions, but that was my part. In any case, I think it's Ron's time now. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Precious, for carefully unpacking those insurance trends for us. Very informative presentation indeed. All right, over to our next speaker now. He goes by the name of Dr. Ronald Whelan. He is the Chief Commercial Officer at Discovery Health. Dr. Ronald's talk is entitled COVID, the Landscape, Future and Potential Impact of the Virus. Over to you.
I think I'm unmuted. Afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you this afternoon. I think we're not quite afternoon yet. We're 11 o'clock in South Africa. Apologies for that. My name's Ron Whelan. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Discovery Health. I've led Discovery's COVID-19 response. I've also been involved in the national COVID-19 efforts, including the national vaccination program. Delighted to be with you this morning. Planning to give you a short update on the COVID-19 situation in South Africa. I'll also share some insights on our latest vaccine effectiveness analysis at Discovery. So what we've done is we've analyzed the effectiveness of the vaccine against the latest Omicron subvariants, the BA4 and BA5 variant. So you'll see that out of the presentation. And then I'll share with you some thoughts and reflections on the way forward. But certainly it looks as if we're moving towards a recovery phase now. Certainly some promising signs of navigating out of COVID. So without further ado, I'm going to lump up a presentation from my side. Let me just get it up and running. Excellent. I think we're good to go. So there are 3 chapters to this particular presentation. The first chapter we've titled the Odyssey chapter. And interesting when you look at the definition of Odyssey. Odyssey is defined as a long and eventful voyage marked by many changes in fortune. And when you think about our journey over the last 2 years or so, that's really been the aspects of the COVID-19 journey. The second chapter is the recovery chapter, and the recovery chapter deals with the various elements of recovery, including clinical recovery, health system recovery, workplace recovery, and indeed your economic recovery. And then the third chapter deals with some ongoing uncertainty. We know that there's still significant uncertainty in the environment, so I'll speak to you a little bit of the risks that we still face going forward. Jumping into chapter 1, I think it's first and foremost, it's important to say we cannot declare victory on COVID too early. We still have many people being infected with the coronavirus in South Africa and globally. We still have many people admitted to hospital and many people, unfortunately, still on ventilators. So be cautious around declaring victory on COVID too early, even though there are promising signs of recovery. A quick update on the global situation at the moment. I think this is a really interesting slide, and that you'll notice the top slide or the top graph here is infections on a global basis, and these are reported infections on a global basis. And then the bottom chart here are deaths on a global basis. These are also reported deaths. And I specifically say reported because we tend to underestimate the level of infection significantly. Yeah, we underestimate the number of deaths significantly as well, and we're seeing that in Africa. What's interesting around this slide is have a look at how Omicron resulted in increased infections, but resulted in lower death rates. So when you compare the Omicron wave 4, to the previous global waves 2 and wave 3, lower death rates, but significantly higher infection. And the reason that's happened is that the Omicron variant is a very, very transmissible variant. In fact, about 40 to 50% more transmissible than the other variants that we've seen before. I also wanted to point out that when you look at the number of excess deaths that have happened globally, and excess deaths is a measure of the deaths in addition to the deaths that we would have expected for the same period. So it's excess deaths beyond what we would have forecast. We've seen globally somewhere in the order of 15 million excess deaths. When you take those 15 million excess deaths and you divide it by an infection fatality rate, it implies that we've had somewhere in the order of 3.3 to 4.3 billion people globally infected by the coronavirus. That's been the extent of the infection. In fact, across South Africa, we estimate that over 90% of people in South Africa have already had COVID-19. Globally, there have been two main strategies in dealing with COVID. On the left-hand side of the picture, you'll see the strategy titled Living with COVID. And countries that have taken that sort of approach have included the UK, the US, France, India, and to some extent South Africa. In many respects, those countries have put some public health measures in place, but by and large, we've tried to navigate our way through the pandemic and have largely lived through the COVID-19 pandemic. On the right-hand side of the picture, you see the second strategy has been a zero COVID strategy, or what's now being labeled a dynamic zero COVID strategy in China. It includes countries like China, South Korea, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Vietnam, and so on and so forth. And if you look at these particular charts, these are excess death charts, you'll notice an interesting pattern. On the left-hand side, you'll see charts look almost like an ECG. Very lumpy, bumpy, and you see the different waves. There's South Africa's wave 1, South Africa's wave 2, South Africa's wave 3, and then South Africa's wave 4. And now we're just into a wave 5 and starting to emerge from a wave 5. Compare the left-hand side pictures to the right-hand side pictures. You can see a much flatter trajectory. Very flat for South Korea, very flat for Hong Kong, very flat for New Zealand, and China very, very flat on an excess deaths perspective. That's what zero COVID's been able to do, is to prevent excess deaths over the last several months across those countries. The challenge, however, is have a look what's happened in the last 2 or 3 months across these different countries and areas. South Korea, deaths up. Hong Kong, deaths up significantly. New Zealand has managed to keep it flat, and then you can see some bubbling happening in China here. So zero COVID strategies have resulted in delays in excess deaths, whereas on the left-hand side of the picture, you'll see excess deaths have played out. Now, what is interesting about this picture is if you look at the blue bubbles here, this is cumulative excess deaths per 100,000 population. And what you'll notice there is these blue bubbles here, somewhere between 160 and 488 excess deaths per 100,000 population. Compare that to the countries on the right-hand side, 34, 121, 65, much lower aggregate deaths on the right-hand side of the picture. In fact, if you look at New Zealand, New Zealand's had less than 1,000 deaths per 100,000 population as a result of COVID. So it's a real success story. So while in South Africa, we've taken this approach of living with COVID, and we're seeing that we're starting to emerge from the pandemic now, we paid a very high price in terms of death on an aggregate basis. And South Africa has seen 488 excess deaths per 100,000 population, higher than what we've seen in the UK, higher than what we've seen in the US, and even higher than what we've seen in India. So we've really had a tragic pandemic in South Africa. So moving on to give you a quick update on the South Africa situation. What you see here in the green is the infections across South Africa, across wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. And then you'll see the infection blip here on the right-hand side of the picture. This has been our wave 5. Delighted to let you know that it looks like we're over the threshold on the wave 5. Wave 5 looks like it's peaked. I say that cautiously, optimistically. We're watching the numbers on a daily basis, both at Discovery and nationally, but it looks as if we're over the peak on this. What is also interesting about this particular picture is if you have a look at the sort of purplish line here, this is the in-hospital death rate. You'll notice high in-hospital deaths through waves 1 through 3, lower hospital deaths in wave 4, and very low in wave 5. So what we're seeing is in South Africa, high infection rates through Omicron, but low rates of death and low rates of hospitalization. From a national perspective, South Africa's had just short of 310,000 people die as a result of COVID in the last 2 and a bit years. And across the Discovery base, we've seen just short of 16,000 members unfortunately die as a result of COVID in the last 2 years. It really has been a dire situation in many respects, a wartime situation when you look at it on a death basis. Just to share with you some of the discovery data we look at on a daily basis. Top left-hand picture there, you'll see is reported infections across the different waves. Top right-hand is the COVID test positivity rate. In fact, we look closely at test positivity rate. What that is it's the number of tests that come back positive divided by the total number of tests. And it gives you a good indication on the level of infection across the population. What you'll notice on this test positivity rate here, the brown lines here, is you see that it went up during the previous waves and then dropped and troughed. But have a look at this interesting pattern here you see in the Omicron wave. So in Omicron in December, we had high test positivity rates. Then through January, February, March, that test positivity rate still stayed high. So it means that the Omicron infection was continued to bubble across our population all the way from December right through until now. The good news, though, is that the test positivity rate does seem to be coming down, but I don't think it's going to drop entirely down, as we've seen just coming out of the initial parts of the Omicron wave. The really good news is we've seen extremely low deaths across the discovery base. You'll notice there 3 deaths on a daily basis. We were seeing somewhere in the order of 120 members dying on a daily basis at the peak of the Delta wave and then the Beta wave before that. And then you'll see that hospital admission rates have also come off significantly. So we're seeing about 140 daily hospital admissions as a result of COVID. At the peak of the other waves, we're seeing closer to 500, 550 daily hospital admissions. I wanted to share with you an interesting story of Hong Kong. So Hong Kong has showed us a lot of interesting patterns since January this year. Bearing in mind that Hong Kong, together with China more broadly, took a zero COVID approach. And up until January, February of this year, Hong Kong had virtually no COVID-19 infections and had virtually no COVID-19 deaths. And this is a picture of the reported deaths in Hong Kong here, compared with South Africa, the UK, and United States. It's a cumulative picture of deaths. You can see how South Africa's waves manifest. When we had waves, then we had more deaths. Cumulative reported deaths over time. What should happen to Hong Kong? No deaths, no deaths, no deaths, no deaths, and then they really accelerated during March and April. They had a tumultuous time in March and April in Hong Kong as a result of Omicron. Omicron spread through the population in Hong Kong at a rapid rate of knots. The challenge in Hong Kong is because there had been no COVID up until January this year, they had very low vaccination rates across their elderly population. So elderly vaccination rates were only about 40%. And because of that, they left that population vulnerable. The elderly just said, look, I'm not seeing COVID. My friends are not getting COVID. I'm not seeing COVID death. I'm not going to get vaccinated. So they delayed their vaccination. Omicron then hit, and it really caused devastation across the population. The second thing that happened in Hong Kong is that the bulk of Hong Kong in the early stages of the pandemic was vaccinated with the Sinopharm or Sinovac vaccine. And unfortunately, the Sinopharm and Sinovac vaccine has been proven to be ineffective against Omicron. So even those people that were vaccinated didn't have good protection against Omicron when it came around. But look how Omicron can rip through a population that is largely COVID naive and is not sufficiently vaccinated, and then has used a vaccine that is not entirely effective. So if you compare the Hong Kong picture to the South Africa picture, there's some lessons to be learned, and that's why we followed Hong Kong so closely over the last few months. We look at COVID resilience across your 4 main areas. The first thing you look at is underlying population resilience. And underlying population resilience is really driven by how old or young is your population and how sickly is your population. So what's the extent to which your chronic diseases penetrate the population. The second lever we look at is the public health interventions, the so-called non-pharmaceutical interventions for preventing COVID. The third piece is then vaccine-mediated immunity. So we know that vaccines prevent infections, and most importantly, they prevent severe disease and death. And then the fourth criteria is infection-mediated immunity. So we know that prior infection does give you good immunity. It doesn't give you as good immunity as prior infection plus vaccination, but it does give you reasonably good immunity. There are also some recent studies that are showing that immunity wanes over time, and it does depend on what variant you've been infected with previously. So when you look at the Hong Kong, South Africa comparison, Hong Kong's got an elderly population, almost 20% of the population over the age of 60. South Africa's got a young population, many people below the age of 60. So that's in South Africa's favor. Hong Kong's got a chronic disease rate of about 31%, South Africa 22%. Neither of those are particularly good. Both countries or both areas have significant chronic disease. So that's a bad piece for population resilience. Hong Kong has been excellent around both its short-term as well as long-term public health interventions. South Africa has been good on the short-term bursts on the public health interventions, the mask wearing, social distancing, and so on and so forth. But we haven't really sustained these interventions over time. In Hong Kong, you've got a reasonably well-vaccinated population overall, but you're not reaching 85 and 90% thresholds, and those are the thresholds you need for vaccine-mediated immunity. You've also got relatively low vaccination across the elderly and relatively low booster rates. South Africa's vaccination rate is about 45% of people in South Africa have now been vaccinated. About 70% of people over the age of 60 have been vaccinated, and then we've got a low booster rate. So we've got pretty low vaccination rates. Admittedly, Hong Kong also had pretty low vaccination rates. Fortunately, we've used the J&J and Pfizer vaccines in South Africa, which we know have been effective against Omicron and the previous variants. And as I said, Hong Kong used Sinovac, Sinopharm, and then to some extent the Pfizer vaccine. So they got a bit of mixed immunity on that front. Hong Kong followed a zero COVID strategy, so their population hadn't seen the prior variants, whereas South Africa had gone through all of the prior variants and they've built up your pretty good population immunity. So it gives you a sense on South Africa is in a reasonably good situation now in terms of population immunity, reasonably good situation in terms of vaccine immunity, reasonable population resilience, and then obviously our health intervention starting to fall away. So moving on to what are we seeing from a discovery perspective on population resilience? I think the first thing we're seeing on population resilience is we're seeing members who are on vitality, and particularly members on higher status vitality, have increased resilience to COVID. And you can look across the different categories here. So increased resilience to hospital admissions, increased resilience to ICU admissions, increased resilience to ventilation, and then most importantly, death. This is a really, really important finding because it says, if you're physically well and you're mentally well, you actually build up some resilience to COVID. Very, very important finding, and we found that across the different age categories as well. In addition to that is obviously, higher age populations have higher risk, but I think your physical and mental wellness certainly bodes well for you in terms of COVID. The second thing we're finding in the science is that population health measures, and most notably mask wearing, works. And the reason masks work, if you have a look at the electron micrograph photographs of masks, really close-up view on the left-hand side here, you'll see the surgical masks, the so-called polyester masks and the N95 mask. I mean, just look how finely grained those fibers are there. It's really hard for the virus to penetrate those fibers. On the right-hand side of the picture, you've got a cotton flannel mask, a so-called cloth mask. Still works, but you can see how more fragmented those fibers are. So you still get protection from a cotton flannel mask, but you get much better protection from a polyester mask. And masks are great for protecting yourself, and masks are great for protecting others. And we certainly continue to advocate masks coming through the Omicron wave. And then I think most importantly from a mask wearing perspective is try not to get into this configuration across your offices. So casual Friday should not mean mask on the head, mask on the chin, mask on the ear, and so on and so forth. We still have a bit of a way to go. We are nearing the end of masks, and hopefully it won't be more than a few more months, but they continue to be important protections across public spaces and indeed offices. From a vaccination perspective, the results are looking excellent. So we're seeing vaccine effectiveness against severe disease and death, which is what vaccines are designed for. So on the right-hand side of the page, you'll see that the vaccines are still about 60 to 70% effective against severe disease, 88 to 90% protective against, if you've had your booster dose, I mean, just think about that for a second. If you've got 2 doses in or 1 dose of J&J in, 60 to 70% protection or risk reduction against severe disease and death. If you've got your booster dose, it pushes it all the way up to 88 to 90%. I mean, that really is excellent, excellent protection. On the left-hand side of the page, you do get less protection from infection. So there's less infection risk protection. We've seen that prior to Omicron, we had about 80% protection against infection as a result of vaccination, and through Omicron, about 33%. But as I said, the most important thing on vaccines is that they prevent severe disease and death. That's where you don't want to land, is in a hospital or in an ICU bed, and you're certainly not on a ventilator or dead. This is the very latest data from Discovery. I'm delighted to share it with you today. This is an analysis we've done over the last 2 to 3 weeks. What I wanted to highlight on this analysis is the ongoing effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine as well as the J&J vaccine against the BA4 and the BA5 variants. You'll know that BA4 and BA5 are responsible for about 90% of infections across South Africa at the moment. Have a look at the Pfizer vaccine effectiveness, and this is after the 3 doses. Remember, it's 2 doses plus the booster. We're seeing 74% protection and up to 90% your protection across your APOL. So somewhere between 74 and 90% protection if you've had your booster dose against the most transmissible variants we've seen to date, the BA4 and BA5. Similarly, on the J&J front, we're seeing about 72% protection. There are wider bands on the confidence intervals across the J&J vaccine. And the reason for that is we just don't have as much J&J data. But anecdotally, we're seeing the J&J vaccine continues to be effective against BA4 and BA5. And I hope that's a clear message around our vaccines are excellent. The booster doses are certainly working. Well worth getting your booster dose coming through the BA4, BA5 part of the pandemic. I also wanted to share with you some of the results on infection-mediated immunity, some of the insights we're seeing. So on the left-hand side of the picture here, you'll see that the severity of Omicron has been 40 to 60% less than the prior variants, most notably the Delta variant. And the reason that's happened in South Africa is partly because Omicron seems to be less virulent. It's also partly because South Africa's got good infection-mediated immunity and South Africa's got some vaccine-mediated immunity. However, on the right-hand side of the picture here, you'll see that mortality rates and the severity of Omicron in a COVID-naive population such as Hong Kong, where no one had really had COVID prior to January this year. There was not full vaccination rates. You can see that the mortality, what we're seeing is that Omicron was as virulent as the prior variants. It really suggests that prior infection plus vaccination is giving us some protection across South Africa, coupled with slightly less virulent Omicron variant. So moving on to more positive news around the recovery phase. I guess, as I said earlier on, we think of recovery in 4 main areas. The first one is clinical recovery. Second one is health system recovery. Third is workplace recovery, and then economic recovery. The worrying part on the clinical recovery is we are seeing significant incidents of long COVID. And what we've done is some analysis of long COVID across the Discovery population. And as you know, unfortunately, COVID affects many parts of the body, the brain, the lungs, the circulatory system, the immune system, and so on and so forth. And what we're seeing is lingering symptoms across communication, concentration, walking, hearing, and so on and so forth because of COVID's impact across the different bodily systems. And on the right-hand side of the picture here, you can see it's relatively high incidence. You're seeing 31% of members with persistent headache up to 18 months after infection. 14% of members with problems sleeping up to 18 months post-infection. Seeing shortness of breath cloud, we're seeing palpitation cloud. So this is a significant concern for us going forward, and we purposely have a COVID recovery program in place for Discovery members to help them navigate the recovery post-COVID. What we're also seeing is higher admission risk post-COVID. So we're seeing a 1.4 times higher admission risk coming out of COVID than we're seeing in the general population. You'll see that on the right-hand side of the picture here. And that lasts for about 12 months after initial COVID infection. The good news, however, is we're not seeing high death rates coming out of COVID. So while long COVID is an issue in terms of your clinical symptoms and recovery, at least it's not resulting in additional mortality and death. Nevertheless, it's something we're going to need to manage. From a health system perspective, the health system utilization is starting to return to normal. On the left-hand side of the picture here, you'll see utilization across Discovery. It dropped off by about 40% during the peak of the lockdowns. You can see it's now returned to baseline and is about just 7 to 10% above baseline. So we're seeing people going back to doctors, going back to hospitals. We're seeing surgeries happen again. On the right-hand side of the picture here, you'll see the patterns in this. And in the US, we're seeing outpatient procedures starting to come back, surgical procedures starting to come back. And the projections are during the third and fourth quarter of this year, the US is going to be at about 7 to 10% utilization above baseline, so quite similar to South Africa. From a workplace perspective, I wanted to share with you some of the results we're seeing across Discovery as a workplace. So many of you will know we implemented a mandatory vaccination initiative, or we launched it back in September last year. It was formally brought into implementation as the 1st of January this year. But what we saw, as you see on the left-hand side of the picture, is when we launched the mandatory vaccination program in about August, September last year, our vaccination rate shot up. Right up to where we are now, where 99% of Discovery staff are fully vaccinated. Very proud of this achievement. It is making the workplace feel significantly safer. And as you see on the right-hand side of the picture, it is having significant clinical outcomes as well. So I'll share with you our Discovery experience. The green bars on the right-hand side of the picture are infections across Discovery staff. We measured it on a rolling weekly basis. In wave 1, we had about 40 to 50 new infections weekly. Wave 2, roughly the same amount. You can see at the peak of wave 3, we had about 160 weekly infections. What was interesting about wave 3 and wave 4 is that they reached the same sort of peak. The little blue bars at the bottom here are our hospital admissions across staff members at Discovery. And what you'll see is prior to August last year, we had a number of staff members unfortunately admitted to hospitals. We had 20 hospital admissions prior to August last year, and unfortunately 22 deaths across our staff. After August last year, we've only had 5 hospital admissions and no deaths. So our hospital admission rate has gone from 5% to 0.5%. We've dropped our hospital admission rate across Discovery staff by over tenfold. That's partly because of the vaccination program, partly because of infection-mediated immunity, and partly because of Omicron. So I don't want to put all of the credit to the mandatory vaccination program, but it certainly had an impact. And I'm delighted that over the last 45 weeks, we've only had 5 people admitted to hospital, and most of those people have made a very swift recovery. So moving on to the last chapter, just to speak very briefly about some uncertainty. The uncertainty is really driven by variants, and I think of variants as Frankenstein. Frankenstein mutates over time, changes shape over time, develops new attributes over time. We're seeing the same thing with the variants. This is a comparison of the spike protein for Delta on the left-hand side and the spike protein for Omicron on the right-hand side. Each one of those red labels there is a mutation. So what's effectively happened is the Omicron spike protein, which is the piece that attaches to your cells on the virus, has changed significantly between Delta and Omicron. And because that spike protein has changed, it's allowed it to enter into your cells much more effectively than it's done previously. So it binds more effectively to your cells, it enters into your cell more effectively, and that's what has resulted in the increased transmissibility. As I said earlier in the presentation, the important thing is the vaccines continue to work against Omicron. There has been some reduction in vaccine effectiveness in reducing infection risk, but there's been excellent ongoing protection against severe disease and death. So we're very, very fortunate that the vaccines continue to work against Omicron. Nevertheless, it's a danger and a concern. Unfortunately, the virus continues to mutate. As you see on this particular page, here's the origin of the coronavirus way back in January 2020 and December 2019. We've seen multiple different variants up until now. Most recently, this cluster of variants here around Omicron, so the BA1, BA2, BA4, BA5, And this is what we're monitoring closely. The risk we face here is that we see another branch develop here. That's the biggest danger for us, is developing another variant and another branch. There's also risk that we see ongoing variants that manifest in a linear pattern on this. So that's why it's important for us to continue to watch for variants closely. We call it surveillance and monitoring for variants. And South Africa has done an excellent job. You'll notice that 2 of our scientists were noted in Time Magazine's top 100 influential people in the world during this week. They have done the variant detection and analysis, and they're very proud of the achievement, and South Africa is certainly leading the way on that. And we've got to keep up that surveillance and monitoring. We've also got to adapt and adjust the vaccines so that they are able to counter any future variants that may come along. So where does this leave us to wrap this presentation up? I think the first message out of the presentation, I hope it's come through clearly today, is that the vaccines work and the boosters in particular work. So please, if you haven't had your booster dose, or if your clients haven't had their booster doses, we're seeing excellent protection from the booster doses. We are still going to have COVID-19 in our environment for the next it's never going to go away completely, and the best protection you can get is from the vaccines, and that's particularly relevant to elderly and at-risk populations. Secondly, the non-pharmaceutical interventions, particularly mask wearing, particularly ventilation, are excellent. So if you're planning on holding an event or a function, hold it outdoors. I know it's getting a little colder in South Africa at the moment, but an outdoor event significantly reduces the risk, and mask wearing certainly reduces the risk. The third thing is we're continuing to drive lots of testing and tracing. We are working on initiatives around rapid testing and home-based testing, but testing is readily available now. You don't necessarily need a PCR test. These rapid tests are brilliant, and you should. And they're very, very affordable. And so if you've got any signs and symptoms, rather test early. And then finally, as I mentioned on the last slide in the presentation, we, as a scientific community, will continue the surveillance and monitoring of variants. That's where the biggest risk sits for us in COVID-19. That's what we'll continue to track. Fingers crossed that the vaccines continue to work. But I think we're feeling confident, even if a new variant pops up, we'll be able to adapt and mold the vaccines. So I'll leave you with a message of hope. We've had a tumultuous time in South Africa over the last 2 years as a result of COVID. The upside on that is that it has resulted in good infection-mediated immunity across South Africa. We've had a good vaccination program. We've got to continue to ramp up our vaccination rates. We are seeing recovery on the health system, and we are seeing economic recovery going forward. The fifth wave is beginning to peter out. So I'm feeling pretty confident that we're going to be able to navigate the last few months of COVID. And we certainly have got enough measures in place to be able to live with COVID going forward. With that, thank you very much for your time, and you're happy to correspond with you outside of the session or take any questions if you'd like. Cool.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ronald. Very informative presentation indeed. And I see there's a lot of engagement happening in the chat function. All right, we're going to have a bit of entertainment now by saxophonist Donovan Prince. He's going to serenade us with some sweet tunes. Do enjoy this and do return after the break.
Hey guys, this is Don Vino, and we're playing you a song that was recorded way back in the 70s. We're putting our own spin on it, and it became an international anthem. So, yes to you.
Thank you so much, Don Vino Prince, for those sweet sounds. thoroughly enjoyed that. All right, over to our next speaker now. Thokozile Mahlangu is the CEO of the IISA, and she's going to be giving us an IISA industry update. Over to you, Thokozile.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Another session of the InsureTalk, which is happening at the right time just before the end of the cycle. Cycle as in CPD cycle and membership cycle. I just want to remind everyone who has to be CPD compliant from a regulatory perspective as well as from a membership perspective that CPD is continuing professional development and not something we do at the end of the cycle to submit our activities. And also to remind you that CPD is more than professional reading. There are a number of activities that are recognizable for CPD compliance. With that said, let me talk about speakers for conference. The African Insurance Exchange is coming up in July. We're looking forward to it, and we're looking forward to hosting you. If you have not registered, you still have room to do so. The conference is going to kick off business sessions on Monday, where we will have Mr. Silo Moloko, the chairperson of APSA Group, doing a keynote address, and he's going to unpack and talk to us about the relevance of insurance in the economy. Immediately thereafter, we'll move on to a topic we have titled The Future of Insurance, and that topic is going to look into the change in consumer preferences and resilience as a competitive advantage. And the panelists that will be part of that discussion, we have Matthew Smith, the founder of Pineapple, whom we all know. We have Natalie Jabangwe, the group executive for digital transformation at Sanlam, and these panelists will discuss and unpack really how we can ready ourselves for the future. There will be also a topic we have titled The Successful Intermediary of Tomorrow, and that topic is going to look at the skills required for intermediaries to remain relevant and to remain successful for the future. We have Theonil McDonald, the Managing Director and Vice President at FIA. We have Pravina Nair, a Managing Executive at Willis South Africa. We have Andrew Coutts, the Executive Head, Intermediary Business at Santam. Another topic I want to touch on, and the speakers that will be forming a panel discussion there, is health is an economic risk. That's the topic we have. And that topic is going to really look at the social gaps and the risk to the economy from a health perspective. We have Damien McHugh, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Momentum Metropolitan Group. We have Barry Charles, who is a healthcare actuary, and we have Buchi Kladi, the current president of the FIA. Now, these individuals are really going to unpack and discuss the impact of health on the economy and the risk it poses and how we could mitigate that risk. Another topic I want to touch on is climate change. I know we all have been talking about climate change, and we've attended many conferences, seminars, webinars on climate change. It is one of those we cannot avoid, and we cannot go through a conference without talking about. Many research work shows that climate change has come back to be amongst the top risks facing the industry, not only in South Africa, but globally. And we have seen it with the floods in KZN. And I mean, of the past weekend, we've seen more of those floods happening again. It is unavoidable, and we have to talk about it. And looking at it from the impact of climate change on the physical environment, on human beings, as well as the economic implications of it. We have Butch Bakani, a program lead at the United Nations, who will be part of that discussion. We have Shivani Hurton from Marsh. She's the managing director and the head of specialty at Marsh. We also have Martin Water, who is the executive for sustainability and sustainable finance at KPMG. Now, those individuals are really going to unpack and look at climate change from all the different angles that I've highlighted. Another topic we will have towards the end of day 2 is the erosion of social cohesion, and really looking at inequalities, the gaps, inequalities, their educational disparities. And there we have Professor Margaret Chitinga Mabungu from the University of Pretoria, who will be part of the panel discussion. We also have Skark Engelbrecht, the Chief Ethics Officer at KPMG. We're then going to close off the day with a topic titled A Different Roadmap for Growth. This topic will then sort of summarize and pull through solutions for the future on how we build resilient organizations, how we remain resilient, how we really develop protective measures to ensure that as an industry we remain that key item in the economic environment. We have Dominic Christian, who is going to be doing the closing address on this topic. Dominic is the Global Chairman for Reinsurance Solutions at Aon UK, and we look forward to his insights. So this is just a few that I'm sharing today. There is a whole lot we're going to be showcasing from the next few days. Keep a lookout for it, and I would like to invite you, if you have not registered for conference, please do so. We still have a few seats left. Capacity is limited for the in-person session, but of course one is welcome to join virtually as well. We look forward to hosting you. The conference is CPD accredited, and you are really going to enjoy the content while you are earning the CPD. And if you are in the in-person session, you will also look forward to engaging with colleagues in the industry and really looking and unpacking the theme, resurgence, resilience, revival. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thokozile, for that update. That AIE conference lineup looking really good. We do hope that our attendees have registered for that session. All right, on to our next speaker now. Tony Fanikak is the founder of Covert, and he's going to be giving us an insurance media update. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you so much. Great to see everybody and great to talk to you again. Thank you for listening to me. I always wonder whether this is the time when people jump up and have their quick break, but I'm hoping that people do listen to my little chirp every now and then. Thank you very much to CN&CO for giving me the opportunity this morning. So I'm not going to take too much of your time and just give you a brief update today about Covert and what's happening at Covert. And, you know, one thing that I sort of always see is that the one thing that most people want, and that includes myself, is a better life. It's like we all hope, and it's not like we think that our lives are not great or whatever, but we all have that hope that tomorrow will be another interesting thing, or another thing that's better. We're all looking forward to a promotion, that next big job, or the next client, landing that big client, etc., and all of those sort of things. And we all know that what actually is needed is to be able to get that is to take action. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Benjamin Disraeli, a long past UK Prime Minister. And he said that the secret to success is to be ready for your opportunity when it comes. And I think that's such profound words, especially in today's environment, because, you know, there's a lot of talk about the future of work and what's going to happen, how the working environment's going to change, what jobs are going to change, etc. But most of that is centered around the physical stuff, about location, about traveling, about the environment, about technology enabling the work environment, etc., and how that will impact us. But I think one of the factors that people sort of tend to not always talk about and think about enough is that how do we improve our ability to actually adapt, and not just adapt to this new environment of work, but to be able to change what we do and how we do it, and to be able to be ready for an opportunity that might come up that we didn't foresee, something that we didn't expect, and all of a sudden it lands in front of us, and are we ready for it? Can we take advantage of that opportunity? Because the world is changing so fast and everything around us, but that means that it presents new opportunities to us all the time. You know, when we look around, there's so many opportunities. And one of the most sort of fascinating and most enjoyable things for me today, after 6 decades on this planet, is the fact that with the press of the button, I can learn anything new. I can get information on just about whatever I want. And it is so enriching, and it's so wonderful to be able to just say, you know, if I need a better way to polish a floor, I can just Google it, and there's like 20 people sharing ideas. It's whatever you want to do. Now, Cover is all about sharing knowledge. So we focused on the industry. We focused on sharing the industry knowledge. So as I always say to my staff, not my knowledge, because that will probably get you to the front door, but the industry knowledge. And we've got so many professionals around us, many of you on this platform, that are willing and able to share information and share their knowledge. So what we're doing at Cover is that we bring all that knowledge together on our platforms, and we try to share that knowledge with the industry in the hope that we can grow the industry, we grow businesses, but we also grow the people in the industry. And we grow people in their careers, we grow them in their personal lives, whatever. We try and make that information available and share it, and make it shareable between people. So one of the things that we've done is, as you guys might know, is our partner in learning and in CPD has always been LearnOn, a very innovative e-learning platform. It's been around for many years. And our CPD partner has grown into a fully fledged online learning platform, facilitating not just a full CPD service for short-term brokers, financial planners, etc., but also providing a massive library of insurance-related courses for online self-study. We have online qualifications, legislation training, class of business, RE examination preparation resources. We also do bespoke product training and other company-specific courses. We keep a full record of all courses that everyone completed. We provide CPD certificates, qualification records, etc. And our mission is to provide a platform where insurance and financial planning professionals like yourselves can go whenever they have time to broaden their knowledge of everything related to our industry. In other words, it's a sort of a self-learning, e-learning environment where you can go and search and you can find what you're interested in and learn more about it, whether it sits within your portfolio or not. But it just helps you to get ready for that next opportunity when it comes around. Secret to success: be ready for your next opportunity when it comes. Be adaptable and be ready for change. So hopefully that we can assist just a little bit in providing that to the industry. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thanks to InsureTalk again for the opportunity. And please, guys, visit cover.coza and see what we've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that insurance media update. Moving along swiftly then to our next speaker, Steve van Roeret from Leopard Underwriting. His talk today is entitled FSP at Risk. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen quickly and my presentation. Right. And my presentation. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. You know, we're in a very difficult place at the moment, I think. It's a space, you can see the heading of my topic, FSP at risk. It's a little bit scary if you think about it. It also represents opportunity. And I would like, as my objective today, just to try to highlight a few issues. And unlike other speakers, I don't have a grand number of stats or numbers to share with you, but I would like to try to spark a conversation that I would hope leads to a business discipline, an approach that will protect you, the FSP. I hope then to move the needle a little bit, just a little bit, and consider what professionalism is actually really all about. As I said, FSP at risk looks a little cryptic and could cover a multitude of sins. I make no apology that the orientation of my discussion today, presentation, is really focused on the advisory intermediary. And I make no apology for that. I'm on a bit of a soapbox. Some of you may have heard a variation of what I'm going to talk about today, but it is slightly different, a little more focused, and perhaps reiteration of some of the issues is not such a bad thing. So let's consider FSP at risk. Why and what? It's fascinating to me that some of the previous speakers have pointed to some of these issues that I raise here on my screen. I have a long list of stuff, and it's really saying the risk and landscape in which FSPs are operating is utterly changed, getting more complex. It is more difficult. The advisory capability is changing. Precious was talking about electrical grids. She was talking about pricing. The perspective was from that of an insurer. But that's fine as an insurer. An insurer can do things and change things and build a product and apply certain terms and conditions. But the advisory intermediary has a more difficult problem. The customer expectation when things go wrong, it's amazing to me how different their thought process is when something goes wrong relative to the time that you as the intermediary talks to them about their needs, their risk analysis, and what they want to insure for. I highlight systemic risks. Now, you don't have to go far when you think about these things. And the systemic risk, let's be clear about that. It's an event. It's an event that affects many, many people all at the same time. Business interruption and the pandemic is an obvious example in recent times. The Sazria issues, the riots, another issue. It's a failure of the internet as a whole, or the national, international telephony systems. It's about the failure of the financial system. Your customer is focused on all of those things. The weather patterns. So I'm being advised that you can't hear me properly. Is that correct? Okay, let me just...
Yes, that is correct. If you could just maybe go closer to your microphone, please.
I'll try to go closer to my microphone, put it forward. I've just been told that I can't be heard. I'm not on mute, though. Is that better if I speak up?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll kind of shout. My voice is not very clear sometimes. It tends to be a bit low. If I do speak up, I'll reiterate what I've been saying. The FSP at risk, why? And I have listed a number of items that I think are important and what you have to think about. So what do you have to do about these things. Fundamentally, your business and your practice of business in relation to risk management is an enormous topic. It's about self-help. If you don't do this risk management and don't think about your business in terms of the risk your business faces, it will become a problem in the longer term. It's the investment in capacity, skills, and training. And I've used the word retention. Tamara, I think it was, that referenced this quite strongly. Inflation, when you think about it, is changing our world. Yes, internationally, they have not had much inflation. We have had inflation in South Africa. And there's going to be increased inflation as time goes on. So when you are advising customers about the need and how much money they need to put aside for their future and their retirement, that becomes an issue. How do you deal with issues such as business interruption and loss of profits? Where does inflation now? We have to start thinking about these things. In other conversations, I've talked about compliance. Compliance is a difficult item, and it's a very heavy thing that you have to deal with. But I would recommend strongly that compliance is about making something a part of your DNA. You do it on a daily basis. That's what you need to do. I highlight proper records of advice. It's not good enough to have this is a record of advice on the top of every email. It needs to be properly set out. This protects you against some of the tough issues out there. I highlight enter into professional service contracts, and that is my real agenda today. And I'll talk about that in my next slide. And then unapologetically, I reference the FIA as the professional body that an advisory intermediary should join. They do help. They provide a lot of support to those intermediaries. The result of what you do, it is about your reputation. It is about business growth. Your customers can trust you. It means you become sustainable. Can I just check that the sound is now good enough?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I need to have a little sip of water because I'm now shouting. So I move on, now pointing to my agenda today. Agreements, FSP at risk, and why you need agreements. The core objective of an agreement is very simple. It sets out what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. It protects you as a business when things go awry. I think this is a discipline that many don't follow. The larger insurance brokers out there certainly do have agreements, and they establish them openly and transparently with customers. If you think about agreements entered into by CAT 2 or the discretionary mandate guys, they set out those agreements very clearly and set out clear warnings to customers saying, you give us your money, we're going to look after it as best we can, but please be aware that you are at risk and it remains your risk, and you potentially lose everything if it goes wrong. So it's making sure that you park the responsibility in the right place and don't take on the responsibilities that you should not be taking on. The long list on the previous slide is a very clear indicator of how it is almost impossible for you to be paid enough to take on all those risks. And without agreements and clarity about what you do and what you don't do, it'll become extremely difficult. What you need to think about, again, there's a little list of things there. It's not a definitive list, but I would highlight a couple things. One, the disclosure duties of your customer. A lot of financial intermediaries and intermediaries providing advice of one sort or another are caught out because the disclosure from the customer is not good enough, or is not challenged, or is not clarified. And when that is provided to the insurer, being the product supplier, things can go wrong. I would also highlight never taking on things where you don't have the skill or capacity. It is not a wise thing to do to chase the buck when you don't have that skill or capacity. Be honest with yourself. Those are the things you need to think about. I highlight, and I need to be careful here because I do provide significant scope of cover, PI cover to the market. But by cover, imagining the worst, it is very surprising to me how low limits of indemnity, how low the limits of indemnity that are bought by intermediaries. It seems to me that the FSCA, in giving their guidance of 1 million and 5 million, it almost has become a default. You should be buying well in excess of those numbers, thinking about the worst situation. You build up capacity, you build up a business, you build up a value, and you buy a tiny little limit of indemnity. It just doesn't make sense to me. So think of the worst and buy what you can afford. It is surprisingly cheap, I think. So a very small practitioner buying 10 million cover, the minimum premium for 10 million rand is probably only 2 bottles of red wine a week. That's 15,000 rand a year, 1,250 rand a month. As I said, in my currency, that's 2 bottles of wine a week. Now move on to the core of what I'd like to deliver as a message: liability limitation. And I only highlight 2 contracts. There are, of course, many other contracts to be highlighted, but I highlight 2. One, the advisory intermediary in relation to a customer, and the second being the agreements you enter into with insurers. And I specifically highlight outsource and binder agreements with insurers. In both cases, if you think about it, the customer can't expect everything to be covered no matter what. And without an agreement setting out clearly what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, you end up being exposed to that long list of heavy exposures I referenced earlier. The customer has to accept somewhere along the line that you have a need to limit your liability. You cannot, this probably shows my age, you cannot provide a blank open check, signed bank guaranteed check to the customer when something goes wrong. That is the expectation gap. So I would suggest very strongly that you revisit every customer relationship, condense it into a proper agreement, and set out a limitation of liability that is manageable in the context of your business. And when it comes to an insurer, they pass on work to you by way of a binder or an outsource agreement. They don't want to do it internally. They ask you to do it and they pay you something for that. It is a contract, and those contracts are already set out in writing as required by the regulation. These contracts, and here's probably a little more of a controversial issue, I think the insurer should remain at risk. They're passing the work on to you. You do it as best you can. And unless you're being reckless or deliberately dishonest, the risk should stay with insurers. Make a mistake, the risk should stay with insurers. They should provide you with a whole harmless and a complete hold harmless in terms of your act, unless it is reckless, dishonest, or deliberately disregarding good practice on your part. Your PI policy, incidentally, you will never be able to buy sufficient cover for those exposures. And generally, the claim made by the principal, if they want to, would be excluded under most PI policies. So limit your liability as between you and your customer. Other professionals do it, consulting engineers, accountants, some lawyers try it, but they do. Other professionals do it, and I see no reason why we shouldn't do so as professionals as well. Obtain an indemnity and hold arms when entering into outsource and bind agreements from your insurers. Revisit those documents. And I reiterate, don't do stuff you are not good at, especially never for revenue. To my last slide, and really to make the point, nothing, and I'll read it, nothing I have said today should be construed as advice. If you choose to use anything I have said, you do so at your own volition and risk. In the event you incur any loss, damage arising out of anything I have said, I do not accept any liability for such loss or damage. If you use anything I have said today, you agree to hold me harmless against any loss or damage you incur. Now, I do realize it's a little bit of tongue in cheek, but I just wanted to make the point. With that, I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that very informative presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. All right, on to our next speaker now. Rianette Whitehead is the editor at FA News. You may be aware that the Insurance Apprentice Season 8 launched last week, and Episode 2 was on today. So she's going to be giving us a brief update on that. Over to you, Rianette.
Thank you, Nani, and thank you for the opportunity to chat. I would love to know that everyone on this session do know about the Insurance Apprentice, but I'm always surprised to see that there are a few people who do not know about it. So my name is Rianette Whitehead. I'm the editor of the FA News magazine, and we have this very exciting competition called the Insurance Apprentice. The main aim is, no, not going into the aim now. So the idea of the competition is if you are 35 or younger and you have been in the short-term insurance industry for 4 or more years, you can enter. You go through a program very similar to the Donald Trump setup. We had to adapt it for virtual, but let me talk about that. Let me just go to my slideshow from the beginning. Okay, so this was the promo that we did. We are on Episode 2, Season 8. That was at 10:30.
Rianette, if you can just share your screen again. We can't seem to see your screen presentation.
Okay, sorry for that, guys. Share screen, I do apologize. Share sound, and it's a go. I am sharing it now from the beginning, and it's a go. Thank you. Okay, brief overview for those who do not know what it is. We have the 4 elimination rounds. In COVID, we had to go completely virtual. 4 elimination rounds, basically everyone who applied went through the elimination rounds. This year, our sponsors for these rounds are Aon, Bright, Chubb, and KGA Academy. Then we have top 12. They then go into task episodes where they literally have to perform tasks set by the insurers. Typically tasks of challenges we are experiencing in the industry, challenges that the corporate might experience. This year we had Auto and General, Sazerac, Hollard Insure, Marsh, and Discovery Insure. So Simon, our resident judge, also called Judge Dredd, sits in a studio and deals with the contestants all dialing in. This is the COVID version. But the last episode this year will be live on 14 July at the Discovery Insure building. Why do we do this? We believe we are developing and growing people. We are changing perceptions because people really don't know what insurance is about. Remember that this is not only for people within the industry. We have close to 650 to 700, 800,000 views on each series. So worldwide, and especially in our country, we really are changing the perceptions of insurance, and we're trying to explain to people what insurance is really about. It's about, for the contestants who take part, an opportunity for them to grow their own personal brand. It's obviously for us to see who've got the guts to face Judge Dredd and Cruella de Vil. And if you want to get more detail on Cruella de Vil, you'll have to watch. And as I mentioned, for corporates, finding solutions for challenges they typically find in the industry. So we develop our own words. We call this fun, serious edutainment. So there's a lot of serious stuff because contestants really have to show their knowledge on insurance principle phase, and then get to be grilled by the judges. Simon is super sharp and keeps contestants on their toes and the audience wide awake. This morning's episode was once again proof of that. The winner wins a lot of prizes. Pre-COVID, it was a trip to Lloyd's of London, a lot of cash, iPads, mentorship sessions, GIPS courses. So for the person who wins, there's a lot at stake. And then obviously for viewers, also you can win cash. I think a very important thing to mention is that you can earn CPD hours by watching the episodes. You watch the episode, you go to the FA News page, log in on the CPD platform, and you can answer a few questions and you've got your CPD hours there. So it is a win-win, everyone learn. We're already starting to plan season 9, TIA 2023. We will be back live in person, which is very, very exciting. So if you are under 35, ready for a challenge, you see yourself as a future leader, you're willing to learn from the best, you have 4 or more years short-term insurance experience, and it doesn't matter in which section or which part of it, now is your time to apply. Filming will be in the last week of January 2023. Thank you for the opportunity. It's an extremely exciting journey for us, and we are very happy to be presenting this to you. So thank you very much, Llewellyn and crowd, for the opportunity, and back to you, Nani.
Thank you so much, Rianette. I must say, I tuned into last week's episode, and the competition is really tight this time around, so we will definitely be tuning into upcoming episodes. All right, we're down to our last speaker for the session. Time has just flown by. Liesel Jonkate is a director for the Consumer Psychology Lab, and she's going to be talking to us today about changing needs and expectations of the post-pandemic consumer. Over to you, Liesel.
Hello, everybody. I would just like to share my screen to start with.
Did you hear that? That's the balance of power changing. We are your neighbors, your brothers and sisters, co-workers, kids, your grandmothers. We're the driver sitting at the red light next to you, the other passengers on the plane. And now we have the power. It used to be Madison Avenue, census data, focus groups, secret shoppers. It used to be jingles, endorsements, infomercials, coupons. It used to be the customer is always right, said those who didn't listen, but that was yesterday. Today we found our voice. We are strangers, but we are organized. We won't wait for your big data. We want whatever, whenever, wherever. 9 to 5. We live 24 hours a day. We are a moving target. We move fast. We are a movement. We are cutting cords, changing the way things work. Status quo, status no. We brought down the taxi industry, but we are not the enemy. We are your opportunity. We are growing, getting better at getting better. We are your path to success. If you can keep up with us, we'll be on the winning team because we'll pick the winners. We are not millennials. We are families with more Facebook followers than you. We are not baby boomers. We are grandmothers who order Christmas gifts from a touchscreen. Gen X. Gen Y? No, we are Generation CX. And you can be too if you listen to us. Create for us. Join us. Generation CX.
So with that introduction, I'm sure that you can appreciate if I say we live in an experienced economy, and the pandemic has had an immense impact on consumers globally. And if we fast forward 2 years later, we are entering this post-pandemic phase. And the question is really, what is this new normal? And is business keeping up with the changing consumer? We've seen beloved brands come and go, and some of those we would never have thought would not exist today. The likes of Kodak, BlackBerry, Nokia. They once stood as icons. We still refer to a Kodak moment, but yet they have ceased to exist. And two of the main reasons for their demise lies in the context of not listening to their consumers and also not adjusting to changing context. And I'm going to use one case study that is very realistic or relevant today, which is the next Netflix example, where at the moment they have just published their latest results. And shockingly, we see that they are losing subscribers in the dozens. They reported 200,000 losses of their subscriber base, 150 US-based jobs lost, and generally the picture is just extremely sad. And the question is, this is a beloved brand that just 1 year ago, in a publication called My Customer, Rochelle Williams published an article to say what are the 5 most important lessons learned from Netflix in terms of customer experience and how well they execute customer experience. Things that she listed that contributed to them capturing an 11% global view share was that they focus on research. They have happy employees. They have human interaction in their service delivery. So when people direct queries, they had a human behind the chats. They had also taken entertainment seriously, and they were very transparent. And yet 1 year later, again in My Customer, we see that the playing field has changed completely. And so what contributed to the demise of, or the direction of Netflix? 2 things that they've published that they believe is an issue is the password sharing dilemma. They report about 100,000 households making use of shared passwords, and they believe that they can recover their revenue losses through implementing a different model, pricing model, where at a lower cost you can share your password with others. Secondly, they also are considering introducing advertising, and at a premium package, there will be a higher price tag to avoid advertising. And the question is, will this strategy keep and grow the customer base? Because I think one of the underlying dilemmas is that they have not kept track with the changing environment, where we all sat and binge-watched movies during the COVID and lockdown period. People are returning to work, and how are they adjusting to the new changes? Nielsen reported that 92% of global customers don't consider themselves to be loyal, brand loyal, and it's quite concerning, because if you look at the Netflix example, how are they going to retain their customers if they introduce two strategies that hinges on the core reason why people love Netflix so much? No advertising, and the opportunity to share the viewing with friends and family. And so we sit in a space where we really have to start listening to what customers are saying. In the insurance industry, the service value chain is quite complex, and yet the customer is still at the heart, should be at the heart of the service delivery. In some of the publications on what customers are saying right now, I'd like to share two publications, top line findings, to illustrate how important it is to listen to your customers. The first is a study done by Qualtrics, and this is one of the leading CX research research homes, and they published their 2020 global reports on consumer trends. And the three big findings were that customers are saying, listen to me, care about me, and treat me better. If you look at the staggering percentages of consumers, and given that the study includes 23,000 customers in 23 countries, it is quite discerning to see that customers are still feeling like business is not taking them seriously. And they found that customers have had enough, and they are willing to walk and switch brands. They suggest that business toss out the pre-2022 business plans, and I'll talk to that in a moment. Customers will stop engaging unless you take action. And I think one of the things that in my personal company we feel very strongly about is that one has to treat your customers as people and not commodities, and humanize the interaction. The second study I just want to briefly refer to is the study published by Forbes, and the heading of the article is "You're Terminated." And every time I read it, I have like a little bit of a lump in my throat and a shock reaction. But the publication really focuses on why a customer stopped doing business with you. And the three key elements raised were the bad service delivery, the interaction with staff, and the effort to connect with the business. I'm just going to briefly focus on all three. Firstly, if you look at the tendency to switch brands, it's becoming increasingly high. And we're seeing an 85% of customers being willing to switch brands. And also, just to put context in this, is 47 countries have been involved in the study. And I think when you look at the opportunity where a competitive brand can offer a better service, the switching propensity is rising. The next point is the engagement with staff. Two of the points raised there was the rudeness and apathy that customers experience and no longer want to tolerate. Then the effort levels have been very prominent. The effort to connect with somebody for support, the long waiting times, the slow response, and the no self-service options. Maybe just on a personal note, I have struggled for probably about 2 weeks to get authorization from my medical aid with absolute lack of responsiveness. And if you need authorization, you kind of need it for a purpose. And to have to follow up 10, 12 times before you get a response is absolutely frustrating. Unfortunately, a lot of customers and consumers are locked into the relationship without having control to move, especially from medical aids, because of the restrictive controls. I'd like to also just share for a moment some of the consumer trends that I think may be of value to consider in one's own business and your own approach to how you deliver service in terms of your customer base and your staff. I have reviewed the publication by GWI, and their consumer trends were very interesting and resonated quite a lot. And I would like to share just 4 of those very briefly, the one being the pursuit of purpose. What I found very interesting is that the lockdown really created the opportunity for people to press pause and to reflect on their life and what is important. We saw this also, especially during last year, with a great resignation in the US reported, as people starting to look at, well, why am I actually working? And I'm not alive to make a living. And so the pursuit of purpose is really driving a lot of the consumer behavior at the moment. The second point is the attention recession. And I think everybody is trying to create airtime for their product or for their service. And the pushback from consumers are very interesting. One point to consider is that the time spent on different media channels does not necessarily reflect in why they are consuming that particular stream, and it doesn't always give you a prediction of behavior. What was interesting also is in the younger generation is the time spent, the consumption of media has changed to moving up gaming into the third spot from music, streaming, and online TV. And TV broadcast has gone right down since the post-pandemic period kicked in. And I think that's something useful to consider, is where your consumers are actually accessing information. The third one I think is very important in business at the moment, and that is the drive towards well-being. And it is reported that 2 out of 3 consumers in this study alluded to the fact that they are taking ownership of their own health and well-being. I may have neglected to say that the base of this research is 4.6 billion internet users, and the study has been continued over many years. The work from home reality has introduced a high sense of burnout and fatigue, mental fatigue, and a lot of consumers are pushing back, and that was raised as one of the reasons for the work from home pushback in the Great Resignations. We saw in April to June last year in the US 11.5 million resignations, and this is significant. And how we see consumers pushing back or workers pushing back is that they are saying no, they're becoming more bold, they are looking after themselves mentally and physically, and they're taking wellness days. I've just recently read a post on LinkedIn where a young father took a day to be with his baby, and he posted how amazing it was that there were no questions asked. He had the liberty to take a day when he felt he needed to reinvest time with his family. And I think that's very important to consider in the consumer space, specifically with employees. And one last point, just on some of the trends noted, is the curated imperfection. And I absolutely love this trend, because the idea of living up to something that's absolutely perfect and enhanced and unattainable is slowly starting to become a more realistic picture. So a lot of consumers are ditching the rose-tinted glasses of a picture-perfect world and posts on social media. And I think that will come into good stead for companies planning their way forward. So in order to leverage what we've learned in terms of what customers are saying at the moment and trends, what are the 3 takeouts that I would like to leave you with? The first one is, if we want to move towards the new normal, is that we have to get to know our customer all over again. We need to understand what is their reality right now, what are their pain points, what are their challenges, and we can't just use data that we have around demographics of customers. We really have to listen to what they say. 2 sources of information are very critical, and the one is primary research, which means that we will get a first-hand view of what your customer base is struggling with at the moment. What is their context, and how do you adapt your service delivery to meet those needs? And the second one is less expensive, because if you use secondary research, which is the information you already have, such as clusters of problems that customers present through your customer service center, or if you use your current voice of the customer, your customer feedback program, to understand what it is that customers are presenting right now with challenges. Another source of very valuable information is your frontline staff. They engage with your customers every single day, and they know how things have changed and how the level of aggression and abuse have changed on different trigger points. And it will be really valuable to get a good understanding of your customers' context right now. The second point is to redesign journeys. The customer journeys have changed, and so the interaction and the experience along the journey has changed. And I want to implore you to undertake a reassessment of your customer journeys and look at it again from outside inwards to see what it is really like to deal with your brand, your product, and your service that you offer. I want to also just raise the opportunity for innovation around transferred expectations. And we've seen this, we call this the Uber phenomena, in that we have become accustomed to the quick response of Uber, and it is transferred into other industries and other products. And the question is this also relevant in your business? The race for distribution is also on. If you think back 2 years prior to the pandemic, the take-a-lots and the Yappie chefs were the best option of distribution, where today we see a rise in the retail space of distribution. The question is this also transferred in your business? Lastly, and I close with this, is really to empower your staff. The staff one cannot assume that they understand what the changes are within the company or within the consumer space, and they need a way to have clarity and understanding of how they need to deliver the service to create a desired experience. I think the can-do approach is very important, because most of the service experiences so far has been really, really frustrating, where the rules and regulations are at the forefront of the service engagement rather than the solution. And I want to close by saying that employee experience is really valid and valuable at this stage to invest in, especially from the sense of creating purpose and passion for employees' work and for the brand, and also to focus on wellness. That relates to the trends that I've shared with you initially. And that's my story. If you have any questions, you are welcome to post it or reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liesel. A very interesting presentation indeed over there. And just like that, we have reached the end of our session. It has just flown by. A huge thank you once again to our headline sponsor today, Discovery, as well as our event partners, the IRSA, as well as Covert magazine. A huge thank you to all of our speakers as well for availing yourselves to share your insights with us. And of course, all of our attendees for joining us today and for your continued support of InsureTalk. A reminder that InsureTalk 23 will take place on the 23rd of June. How is that for apt? We have posted the registration link in the chat function, so do yourselves a favor and register now. As I always do, I'd like to leave you with a short quote that is fitting for today's theme. Maybe it's time we find a new normal, and that is by Trish Collar. That is a very fitting quote for today's session. From myself, Nontutulo Mhlungu, and the CN&CO events team, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do stay safe and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. See you at InsureTalk 23.